Welcome back. Well, yes, indeed, we've got Honorable Yunusa Abubakar, who is a member of the House Committee on House Services. Good morning, Honorable. Thank you for joining us today on the program.
Good morning, Chamberlain and viewers.
Yeah, quite a number of issues. I mean, this particular one comes about as a result of the comment made by at least one of your colleagues who says that the National Assembly is broke, and that something needs to be done about it. And you know how many Nigerians feel about hearing the National Assembly is broke. They've spoken about the resources allocated to the National Assembly in the first instance, and now saying that the National Assembly is broke. They think, whoa, are they trying to ask for more funds? So perhaps let's start on that note. What is this about that the National Assembly is broke?
Well, alhamdulillah, it is not an issue to laugh anyway, but probably I may put it in a different perspective. Not broke as such, but if you talk of inadequacy, that the amount allocated to the National Assembly is somewhat grossly inadequate. But to the extent of being broke, you know, it connotes a lot of meaning. So the issue at stake is that maybe in the form of nomenclature-wise, one will say the amount allocated to National Assembly is really grossly inadequate to run the structure that exists in the National Assembly.
Well, how do you react to many who feel, in the first instance, they can't relate because they don't even know or have details about the revenue that accrues and who gets what in the National Assembly? So how do they then relate when it says that there's inadequacy concerning funds?
Good. You see, the National Assembly in the first place is not a revenue generation agency. It's more or less of most of the things being allocated to the National Assembly can go to the normal day-to-day running. Let's call it overhead cost or running cost. You see, the National Assembly can be looked in this perspective. We have, apart from the complex itself and what it entails inside the complex, then you have some department. You have the budget office called NABRO. You have the NILS, National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Study, which is an equivalent to a university. It's a degree awarding institution up to PhD. So it is an institution of itself. Then you have the National Assembly Service Commission that is responsible for the employment and remunerations of some staff of the National Assembly. Then when you come to the main complex, you have the 8 of the members too. The 109 senators, 360 members, they have 8. Each has a minimum of 5/8. When you talk of the principal officers, they have their own 8. When you talk of the presiding officers also, they have their own 8, numbering up to 40, 50 as the case may be, whether you are Senate President or Deputy Senate President, Speaker or Deputy Speaker. Now, having said that, you now look at the capital component of the National Assembly. All those buildings in the National Assembly, the whole complex need to be maintained. Then they have vehicles, they have tools, machineries. Then each these sections also is capitally, they have the capital component of the budget. Like, look at NILS now. They are now in the rented apartment. They need to have a permanent structure because all over West Africa, parliamentarians do come and take courses, right from certificate courses up to PhD. Then you have the National Assembly Service Commission. Recently, I think it is here on this channel, that they took a tour of the Speaker and the members of the NILS that go to the permanent site. You can see the edifice being put there. All these are capital things that are being done from the budget. They saw 120 or 130 thereabout. It used to be 150 during the Jonathan administration, but for some reasons best known to the executive, it is cut down to about 115. There was a time during the last assembly, which I was a member, the budget was about 105 billion. Now, when you look at even the aid alone, take about 12 billion. So when you segregate all these sections, you look at the running cost. Now, we might not appreciate the enormous amount of money being pumped into the National Assembly until you look at each integral part of it. How much does it take when you conduct what we call, self-assessment? If you can do a kind of an assessment, needs assessment. Take each member, you now assess it vis-a-vis the bills he is to sponsor, vis-a-vis the motions he is to sponsor, and what it entails. Thank God now that we have to look inward and we are trying to have an e-parliament, that most of the things have to come electronically. But yet you need the money also, capital, the so enormous amount of money for you to even install the electronic gadget in the chamber. That is one. Then look at the whole chambers that takes 360 members. It has about a capacity of almost 900 seats, and they have to be maintained. The microphones, all these electronic chips for our electronic voting, and so on and so forth. You go to the Senate chamber as well. So when you look at all this, as I'm talking even to you now, when this issue of we have to seek the intervention of the FCT, Federal Capital Territory Administration, to really come in and see to it, because the so-called money being attached, we will, when people are talking that we are spending about 30-something billion to renovate the National Assembly. Now, that aside, compare it with our peers. When you look at where we borrow our presidential system of government, that is the United States of America, just pick your Google, your handset or iPad, just Google members' representational allowance. Then you can see members' salaries. When you compare, you can't even talk of the Nigerian system. When the whole country economically we are down, there is an economic meltdown, then the resources, the income has come down, especially with the COVID, that is worldwide, then we will agree. So
we'll look at some of those figures.
The National Assembly.
Just a moment, Honorable. We'll look at some of those figures that you have raised. Just we'll look at them soon. But when part of the statement credited to him, your colleague who spoke about this, was that he has said it before, he's saying it again. So does that suggest that the executive doesn't seem to agree with the legislature on this one, despite the National Assembly saying they have the power of the purse? Because if they haven't done anything about it, it suggests that they don't share the same view with you on that.
Well, you see, it depends upon how the executive view it. But the facts remain that, you see, the legislature and the executive, until recently, they have been in conflict. And a lot of people in the executive has misunderstood the works of the National Assembly. So if they wouldn't really comprehend and appreciate the work of the legislature, then I'm sorry, we will continue to be having this conflict. And we will reach a time whereby the legislative arm of government, as far as Nigeria is concerned, might not function. Let me give you an example. A lot of people are coming in, even the executive, they have been coming for committee meetings. We have been calling them either due to oversighting or public hearing. They can see how the committee rooms are very hot, that the air conditions are not working because it cannot be maintained. It used to be maintained by Julius Baja, who put the edifice in the first place. So maintenance, everybody knows, even maintenance, to put bulb. Just last week, the whole of the bulb somebody just entered from our own bureaucracy. Say, Honorable, what happened? Your office is dark. I said, well, look at it. I've been staying here for the past 6 years, and this is how it is. They have to now quickly have to ask me to make some requisition and some lighting fittings. And when you look at the lighting fittings, about whole packet of this incandescent light or fluorescent light were brought, and it's enormous amount of money. Now look at the whole over 600 offices that exist in the arm of the House of Representatives. Talk less of the Senate. So, sir, what we are saying, the people should appreciate. Now, look at it. When you look at the Congress, like I was talking, when you Google it, you will agree with me that the minimum salary of a U.S. Congress is $174,000. Convert it with our exchange rate. How many millions do you see they take monthly? 174,000 annually, which translates to over $14,000 monthly. Now, this is just salary. Then they have what we call the MRA, Members Representation Allowance, that takes care of other logistics, which in our own case, we call it running costs. In their own, the minimum or on the average is 1,444,000 thereabout. The chart is there. It was introduced in 1996 until today, the 2020 there, when you now Google it, is there. MRA, Members Representation Allowance of the U.S. Congress. You will see it. So when you compare this, the presidential system of government is really very, very costly to run. Since Nigeria chose this system of government, then we have to look into its own attendant. For the Nigerian system, when you compare how much does it, like I said, need assessment. In the last assembly, I was privileged to be part of the committee that did what we call need assessment of each member. And we came out to the conclusion that the amount being allocated to the National Assembly is grossly inadequate.
In comparing as well, I mean, we need to look at the GDPs of the countries. For example, when you look at the GDP of the US, you see it's over $20 trillion. You look at Nigeria's GDP, just less than $1 trillion. So, I mean, it's always good to look at those things in the context. So that's also another conversation right there. But, you know, speaking about, you know, issues such as maintenance and all that, looking at the Appropriation Act, that's the 2021 budget, you see that some of the line items you mentioned are actually there. You see National Assembly Management, 16 billion naira. You see National Assembly Commission, which you mentioned, legislative aids. All of them have, you know, the allocations, which totals 134 billion naira for the National Assembly. So in terms of maintenance, for example, when you talk about air conditions, when you talk about the rooms and all that, are you saying the 16 billion naira which was appropriated, for example, for this will not be enough?
It is obvious. Like, well, during your opening remarks and introduction, I'm a serving member of the House Services Committee, which is supposed to look at all these things. You see, when allocations were made on monthly basis, when they receive the receivables, they now break it. The bureaucracy is there. I will give you just one component. According to the bureaucracy, and that is our own administrators, to maintain our chamber alone, they are spending over 40 million naira monthly. 40 million naira monthly. Multiply that by 12. Then you can see how they arrive from that 16 billion that has been allocated to them. And then they have how to manage. Look at the CNA office, clerk of the National Assembly. Then you have the Senate clerk, you have the House of Reps clerks, and their own bureaucratic setup. How does it take to maintain their own impress, the running costs? So this is, and you see, what I was trying to say is that the House Services goes to the maintenance of the members and their needs.
Well, Honorable, since we're doing the calculation, if you say it costs 40 million naira monthly for the maintenance of the chambers, if you multiply that by 12, that's 480 million. That's still, I mean, and I think that's like the biggest chunk of maintenance. So that's 480 million naira. You
no, it's
16
not.
billion
I cut
naira.
It. With due apology, listen, I am now in channel television. Ask your people how much do they charge the National Assembly for a live transmission? 2-3 hours.
You said that for maintenance. You said for maintenance, it's 40 million.
I gave you only one component, sir. I gave you only one component of how.
So you're saying if you put everything together.
You read from the.
Pardon me. So you're saying if you put everything together. I know, let me just put this, just to be clear. So you say when you put everything together, 16 billion naira, which was allocated just to, National Assembly management, would not be enough. So how much will be enough then?
Well, going by our need assessment, the amount should have been doubled. Let me give you another instance. Everybody knows that we do live coverage. I mean, the Senate airs on Wednesdays, and the House of Representatives at least go live throughout our proceedings on Thursdays. Now, look at the minimum we can get is about how many millions they are charging us. At least you from the press, you know, and you should help us disseminate this information. How much are they being charged? So running it is very costly. How much do we pay the newspapers for publication? When we are to do public hearing, almost every day we conduct not less than 5 or 4 public hearings. How much do we spend on these public hearings? How much do we bill, put the bill of the bill division when they are processing it to gazette it, the paper to produce to do gazetting. So all this, when you put together, we are not just sitting here and take the amount and then divide it by the 469 thereabout members of the National Assembly. That aside, our salary is not even here. This budget does not contain our salaries. It's just the running cost. So mostly, like I said, what is taking the junk of the money is how to conduct the day-to-day business of the legislative arm of government.
Okay, so Honorable, if you say this does not contain your salary, so that means there's another provision for that entirely. Just how much is that in total?
Well, our own salary is, when you look at the Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Commission there, they applied all our salaries. So, okay, what I'm trying to say that the 16 billion is not part of our salary. Salary is not there. The salary component is also there. So what I'm trying to say is that they have allocated the salaries, but then the National Assembly do pay it. So when I say it, the 16 billion you are cutting and the management money that is be given to run it does not include our salary.
Oh,
By
I
the
see.
time you take our salaries, put it on one side, take this running cost on one side, by the time you compute it, you discover that after paying salaries, like in the House of Representatives, which I can authoritatively talk, we have it in the House Services, after paying all the salaries, what is even left to do capital is just about 304 million on monthly basis.
Okay,
Multiply that by 12, it gives you the annual.
Quite a number of issues, really, because looking at line items, you see Senate 33 billion. I mean, that's just the item. Senate's 33 billion, House of Representatives 51 billion, then he breaks it down 51. To other 51 billion, then he goes on and on. But earlier on, you said that what used to be appropriated to the National Assembly before now was way more, and then you said the executive cut it. So does that mean what you submitted was way more, and then the executive said, well, you're not going to get this, let's cut it? How is that process really, the appropriation process for the National Assembly? Yeah,
let me come. You remember there was a time, even this economic meltdown started when the present DG of the WTO, now Dr. Ngozi was the Minister of Finance. She even said Nigeria is really, when we are about going into that recession for the first time before they exit office, there was this issue that we have to be borrowing to borrow salary, is the way we manage our resources. Then coupled with the economic meltdown worldwide, then when we then dwindling revenues, it was in that venture that the National Assembly need to cut, and then we agree, and then we allow them to cut. But as time pick up, when we are trying to cut cost of governance, we really try, and then we maintain it at the 115 until recently, when the dollar continue going, because all your purchasing ability can be compared to the dollar. Most of this in Nigeria, we don't manufacture it, we import them. So all this iPad to be given, the electronics gadget to be given, all this for us to keep in tandem with the modern realities. The basic necessities is what we are now doing. And the management is crying that when you take out what it takes for a member to produce a bill, a motion, to conduct research, oversighting, all this thing that comes in hundreds. Sometimes some of our public hearing, we run it on air live for people to see what we are doing. So all these are money consuming avenues, because nobody can give you a pro bono services. There was a time I joked here last time when we were talking about Mafia, and I said, okay, can the channels give us a pro bono services? And they say, no, it can't, because if you give pro bono service, you cannot be on air by now. So you need money, you need oil to oil and grease whatever that you need to pivot yourself on it.
Earlier, you've mentioned a number of times running costs. I'm wondering, are you talking about running costs for the National Assembly or running costs for each legislator?
Well, whichever. Let me tell you, during
just a moment. I just wanted to be clear. Just a moment, Honorable. I want to find out. You've talked about the 16 billion naira, which is for the maintenance of the National Assembly. How much does a legislator, a member of the House of Representatives, get as running costs?
What we did for the need assessment for each member during the last tenure under His Excellency Yakubu Dogara, we came out with at least a member need not less than 25 million monthly to effectively discharge. That is what you call impress. These are a retirable amount of money that as an impress effectively to run your office, which is, if not more, equivalent to that of a minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Now, what we are getting now is by far less than 10 million to run. How do you come about that? The issue of your foreign travels is there, your escort. If you are to travel, how many times a member need to go for oversight function? Thanks to COVID, this is not being redone to virtual meetings. But yet, there are some traveling that is absolutely necessary. You have to enter these parliamentary associations, Commonwealth parliamentary associations, ACP, EU, ECOWAS, a lot of them that you have to undertake. Now, what is the cost of foreign trip with your escort? About $900 a day when you travel out. Then the DTA, duty travel allowance, when you are to travel outside Abuja to do some oversight for most of these federal government agencies across the nation. So when you put all this in, you aggregate them together, the cost of public hearing, which at least you cannot conduct a public hearing with less than 10 million per public hearing. How many public hearings do we conduct in a week, in a month, and throughout the year? So when you talk of running costs, during that tumble time, it used to be with the bureaucracy that member has to apply, then you'll be given the money. At the end of it, you retire. The house services deem it fit that is slowing down the work of members. You have to travel and it will come in a week's time, maybe just 7 days, for you to make application, for it to be approved, to go through the bureaucratic norms. You discover it will take about 3 weeks. Before, if you cannot embark on this trip until the money is approved, you end up missing the trip.
All right, Honorable,
you know, a colossal damage.
Sometimes people wonder, is that why the National Assembly often insists on certain things getting to public hearing, even though the public says, no, we don't like this bill? But we'll talk about that when we return in a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. Well, Honorable, lots of reactions coming through about costs of maintenance of the chamber. They don't believe that. How could you be spending 40 million per month? But then you did talk about comparing what maybe a U.S. legislature earns with that of Nigeria, saying some sort of disparity. But, Labour has spoken up in a similar fashion, which the National Assembly don't seem to agree with them. They talk about the minimum wage. The average minimum wage, I think, is at 2019 in U.S., $7.25. And if you multiply that by 410 per hour, which is what it is, dollar exchanges in some areas in the country, you see, and then maybe by 8 hours a day, by 31 days per month, you see that the average Nigerian earns far less of a minimum wage, which is the yardstick for which you are using to say the National Assembly needs more money. So can we then say that on that basis, the National Assembly should be looking to agree with Labour concerning the minimum wage if you're comparing countries, or US, for instance, with what Nigerians earn as minimum wage?
I hope the viewers cannot understand me the way you do, but if that is, I'm very sorry. What we are trying to say is this is what is tenable as international standard best practices. Now, your colleague have raised the issue of our GDP. We are hoping to grow to reach there. What I'm trying to clear our mind to put us in this correct perspective is that Nigeria is not yet Uhuru. We are not yet there. For us to be crying is too much. There must be a relativity. It is a relative term compared to who? So now when we compare from where we borrow their system, the presidential system of government, which is very costly, I'm just trying to give us to serve as a yardstick. So if this is where we hope to attain, we are by far not even there. Now, generally speaking, when we compare some other parameters, just like the GDP growth, our revenue that is coming, our non-productive posture, that Nigeria is not a producer nation, that we can enhance, the strength of our currency internationally, and some any other variables, then we have to admit that we have to contend with what we have, because we cannot do, there will be no any other miracle we can do to give us much money to satisfy our need. So it cut across labor, the parliament. We are also part of labor. We are also a labor union because we earn salary and we belong to labor organization. That's why some of us are being called comrades. So in essence, when people are talking generally that the money given to National Assembly is even too much, what we are saying, it is inadequate compared to variables as it is tenable now. That doesn't mean that the National Assembly is saying that it's broke totally. But what we are saying, going at this rate, and if nothing is done, I fear that we might not be able to sustain our legislative arm of government like we are sustaining the judiciary and the executive arm of government.
Now, given that variable, Honorable, take a look at this message from Gyang. He's been listening intently to this conversation, and he has a suggestion. What the Honorable member has just confirmed is that having two legislative chambers is not sustainable. Do you agree with him?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Look at Ghana, our peers in the ECOWAS region. They are not doing a bicameral kind of legislation because the Senate is not operating independent of the House of Representatives. That is one misnomer that people don't understand. You see, whatever laws that is being passed singularly at the Senate chambers, it needs the House of Representatives concurrence and vice versa.
Yeah. Are you then suggesting, Honorable,
this House cannot do so?
Just a moment, just to put it in context, would you agree with those who say, rather than have two chambers, we should collapse the National Assembly into one chamber, House of Representatives and Senate should be just one chamber as opposed to having two? That should cut down some costs.
Why not? If that will cut costs of governance, then we have to change our constitution.
Yeah, is this something you think the House of Representatives will be willing or glad to discuss?
Why not? We are for the people, and if that's the desire of the people, the desire of the people, why not? We amend our constitution. We abrogate the presidential system of government.
Yeah, would you then be happy to come up with a bill to the effect?
Well, there are members' personal bills that come, that are there and that we are being processed. But mostly, this should have come from the executive, so that we will embark on constitutional review. And you see, there are certain norms in the constitutional review that the state component, the federating unit, are also involved. And we are having problem with the houses of state houses of assembly for us to garner the 2/3 majority to effectively amend our constitution. These are some of the bottlenecks that we are having. until the governors queue in. The public also queue in. After all, the same people who elected us are the same people who elected the governors, who elected the state members of the assembly. The way it is now, the state assemblies are supposed to be controlling the governors, but the reverse is the case. So unless the people, the media, I mean, people have that understanding and they feel that they have the powers of the ballot to really tailor the state houses of assembly to really dictate what is happening to the governors. That could only be possible that if selfish interest is removed. That is, if the electorate now can actually dictate to their respective state houses of assembly, and invariably each state can queue into this project, then we can actually trim the cost of governance in all the three arms of government, so that Nigeria can now cut his own spend from his purse. I mean, to cut the cut according to our own size. But the way we are going with this presidential system of government and the way our revenues are going, unless and if a miracle happen tomorrow to generate more income, I'm afraid we might not be able to sustain the whole governance, not just the legislative arm in government. So if there could be a way, senators operate, you take the Kenyan scenario, they don't have a Senate chamber. Take the Ghanaian example, they're having a parliamentary system. It's all, even their deputy president, vice president, and some other ministers come from the parliament. Take France, take the EU. This is the practice there, other than the American system that we are blindly copying.
Okay, well, Honorable,
when we know that we don't have the resources to sustain it. Okay,
well, so still talking about this issue of comparison, but first of all, when you say that the funds available or the money appropriated to the National Assembly is inadequate and you're asking for more, pretty much, so that means that you think that there is some place that the money is, really, you think that the money is there. So where do you think the government can get the money from to channel into some of the needs that you have in the National Assembly?
Okay, let me come from another perspective. We are having a budget of 13 trillion. The recent one, or the one that we are in now, 2021, January to December. We are having a budget of 13 trillion, 13 trillion. Then take this 134 being the budget, billion being the budget of the National Assembly. What percentage is it? I believe it is less than 1%. It's not even up to. Even if it is more than 1, it's not up to 2%. Now, this 2%, this is the amount you want to arm a government that is dutifully saddled constitutionally to oversight, to make sure that the remaining 98% of this 13 trillion is not wasted, is really put on the framework. Are you fair to the system?
Honorable, that perspective doesn't quite answer my question. So let me try to rephrase it. Where do you think we can get that money from to fund or better fund the National Assembly?
Get it from that 98%. Source it, mop it out.
Well,
from that
Honorable,
98%,
that's a bit
at least
ambiguous.
Take it to about 5%.
Honorable, that's ambiguous, you know. I mean, that 98% has been allocated. Ambiguous. So specifically speaking, now, because, I mean, there are different line items. If you go through the pages, over 1,000 pages of the appropriation, really, when you take out the items. So which of them, particularly, do you think that money can be taken from?
You see, we were talking, when you look at the budget grossly, there are so many agencies that, as I'm talking to you now, they are redundant. So many of them. Look at the line item of the federal budget. Don't look at the National Assembly alone. There are so many of them that are redundant. Some of them are inadequately funded. Some of them are overfunded. Now, take this issue of insecurity. If we don't have insecurity, where will the defense have almost 900 billion? It's the highest. So many ways are there to cut. I mean, to cut corners. I don't want to go into there, but if we want to do it, we must do it. All I'm trying to do is that you cannot give me 1 naira to look at somebody how to spend 1,000. I can either be compromised or I may not have the proper tools to confront and tell him to do the needful. And that is what is happening when we are processing and administering this war against the bandit, the insurgent, and whatever. Because we don't have the wherewithal, we don't have the tools, we don't have the modern weapons to confront them.
But you know,
and
when you speak
when
about...
you do that, it translates to Naira and Kobo.
When you speak about security, I mean, the WTO DG who is visiting the country did say Nigeria's global trade figures is just a mere 0.33%. And when you say if Nigeria doesn't have insecurity, you're a member of the ruling party. Who better to blame if not the ruling party? You are in power. You should ensure that we don't have this insecurity problem in the first place.
You see, the issue is not the vehicle, but the person driving the vehicle. I and you are the Nigerian people, and we are the Nigerian government taking the definition of democracy. Now, what we are saying, people are talking of restructure. We have to restructure our mind, though this is a subject for another time. How patriotic are we? It's not about the APC, it's not about the PDP. How patriotic are we? Are we in governance and then looking at our own, or we took the nation to be above our own selfish primordial interests? That is what Nigerians should be questioning. That should have been the issue. Even if we have the minimum resources, are we ready to make some sacrifices so that the country can be better and be a better place to live?
What does that mean? What kind of sacrifice are you talking about?
Sorry?
What kind of sacrifice are you talking about here?
The sacrifice, how we can do with little to achieve much.
But the National Assembly has little. Can't the National Assembly do much with that?
That is what we are doing. We are trying to do within the limited, scarce resources. We are trying to give our best. That is how we manage to stay suffocating. I am now in your studio without air condition. I might not be able to talk. But if life goes on, we are doing this life problem and your air condition goes, I have to continue. That is a sacrifice. Maybe after I can go and look for medication. So this is what is happening, and it's a kind of sacrifice that the members of the National Assembly are doing. We conduct our committee works, we conduct our oversighting, we do our citizens preliminary under these humid conditions.
Well, I don't understand what you mean by... Well,
so that's a sacrifice.
I don't quite get that part of without the air condition, because the system is really there, unless you ask them to put it off. So, of course, it is indeed that. But speaking about security, we've seen several times how governors have spoken about their frustration about what to do with security. The country has talked about the policing structure, how we need to reorganize it. I think even the VP did say policing a country of this size from the center doesn't quite cut it. And therein lies the issue, the National Assembly. The ball is in your court to amend those laws and ensure that states or restructuring of the police force occurs. But it fell through when it came to the National Assembly. So who then do you blame? What is the role of Nigerians here if this is what they wanted? And the National Assembly said, well, we didn't see that clause properly. They even promised to revisit it until date. The rest is history.
Well, the National Assembly did not turn down the wishes of the people. Peradventure, I happen also to be a member of the Constitutional Amendment Committee. We just sat last week and we rolled out our timetable program. We are on course. In fact, just this Thursday, Friday to Saturday, we're having a 3-day retreat to approach all these issues. And I'm telling you, the issue of security, like breaking the security architecture, the policing, community policing, trying to break it, because actually Nigeria is too large for a centralized policing system. That is one. Number two, even the way we go about combating some of the menace, bedeviling the peaceful coexistence of the Nigerians is also going to be looked into. But most important is, like I said, is the conscience, our mindset about eating where you work. I'm not blaming the security agencies, but in a way we have to. They do compromise to get money. You found some security personnel giving information to the insurgent, to the bandit, to get money in return. In many instances, a lot of police officers, DPOs are bound to be compromised along Kaduna Road, to be turning their eyes when people, armed robbers, kidnappers are operating. These are there, but it's for the record. The DSS and whatever they are doing, they are intelligent and they are gathering it. So go to the military. You see the amount of money they are making when they put roadblock in Borno State. The governor have said it severally, charging 5,000, 10,000 per trailer, making millions out of the border. So compromising. We saw a security personnel that compromised one kidnapper in Taraba State. So we don't need to say that we know. So our problem is we need to really check ourselves and know that we are working for this nation and be contented with our salaries. That is the issue.
Honorable, earlier you said something, that some would find a little shocking. You said that there are some ministries, departments, and agencies to whom money have been appropriated, that many of them are redundant. I'm wondering how the House of Representatives Committee on, working with any of those agencies or departments of government are coping with that. I mean, if you knew that from the previous year they were redundant, how come money was still appropriated to them this year?
Let me give you one instance. I happen to be a member of a justice committee. I won't mention that specific department or agency under justice that I oversight. They have almost overhead salaries throughout there, almost about in billions, but only 40 million naira is allocated for them. So you pay personnel in billions just to administer 40 million. What do you call that? I don't have the vocabulary to describe that. That is one. And there are several, many of them, that sometimes their statutory roles is not being given to them.
I'm asking, Honorable.
That's the issue.
That's the question I'm asking, Honorable. If such a situation exists, what has your committee done about that, for instance, to ensure that the nation is not, as you say, ripped off?
It's to raise alarm, and we don't execute. We say alarm, then we send it to the executive and draw their attention. So the executive arm of government, the president is an executive that have absolute powers to do that. So what if you talk, you raise, you blow the whistle and nobody attend to it? What do? You shut the government, which is not within our own ambit of our own constitutional roles.
But it baffles people because the ruling party, but the leadership of the National Assembly, in fact, majority of the National Assembly, are of the same party with the ruling party. So if they can't have that conversation and address this, how then do you run a country?
That's why I say there has to be a retreat to change the psyche of the people of the executive. We were here on channels sometime 3, 4, 5 years back, and somebody from the executive is saying it's not even mandatory for the president to even implement the budget being passed by the National Assembly. What are you talking? We are here in Nigeria. So somebody found himself in the executive arm who doesn't know the working and the nitty-gritty of the National Assembly. And you put him there. And when you talk, it's that yes, it has to be there. You were there when you see the executive people, ministers coming there confronting the National Assembly. And yet, we are like a toothless bulldog.
But Honorable,
so unless that issue is there, and if the National Assembly could exert her powers, then the same public will be talking that the National Assembly is holding back the government, is slowing down the government, is not agreeing with the government. So that is the issue. Ours is to raise and allow them whoever, if I happen to be the president, I will do things differently.
let me just lean on that, Honorable. What exactly would you do differently?
Yeah, I will look at the present practices. Is not going to be business as usual. We will definitely is going to be business unusual. There are so many things I will bring. I will stand my feet. I will oversight. I wouldn't be relying. Yeah, I will delegate, but then I will make sure that the authority is with me. And I will not put any no-nonsense somebody to head an agency. So we have to really be, I will be in tandem with my National Assembly, let them do their oversight function. I will even extend that all the oversight activities of National Assembly, find a way, a look back to me, so that I will know what is happening.
So, Honorable, isn't the President doing...
the DSS, the intelligent people to be on their toes.
So, Honorable, isn't the President doing all these things that you mentioned now?
He is doing, but he needs some able lieutenants. That's what there are a lot of Judas in the presidency. And I can tell you, and without apology.
And some of them are members of the ruling party?
Look, I don't even, I'm not, if they are not members of the ruling party, they are affected. But do you know that for the good part of this government, the rule is like a kind of a mixture. It's just like you have rice and beans mixed together, or jollof, with the green beans and everything together, with even the black seed. At the time when this presidency came in, people thought there's going to be a total overhaul of this country. But he ruled around with the PDP people. All the PDP appointments, none of them were dropped until they finished their tenure. Some of them were even renewed. Some of them were even taken. Well, in the view of saying that if you are good, then you are good. Just like the Adesina now, he was a minister there, but it was this same government that promoted him, take him to African Development Bank. Yes, these are good things that we have. We have the Ngozi now, though she wasn't there 2015, but at least she was found worthy from the World Bank now to the World Trade Organization. So we have worthy ambassadors, but we have worst ambassadors.
Honorable, it's quite baffling to hear that there are some Judases, to use that expression. And if you know that story, you know how it ends, the betrayal and what happened afterwards. But we don't quite want that to happen. So what do we need to do now to ensure that betrayal doesn't lead to the worst?
Anybody that has been uncovered, that has been discovered to have been a Judah, should be shown the way out. And with immediate effect. An expeditious, judicious panel of inquiry should be set up and then kick him out of service.
Well, as we wind down now,
a lot of people...
Sorry, we understand that some members couldn't go or can't go to their constituency to participate in some of those registration exercises that the party did ask of them. Does the party, do they raise these issues to the authorities, since they're in the same party, about the situation with insecurity in the country?
Well, really, if somebody couldn't go for the revalidation exercise, cannot go to his constituency, a member of this chamber that I belong, then I'm sorry for that person. Because even where there are this insecurity, there are people from Kalabalge, all this where this Boko Haram are there, and they are members. How was their election processed? So to me, I think some people are overblowing it. The whole local government has been relocated from the insurgency maybe to the headquarters to Maiduguri. Then the same machinery can be uprooted for them to revalidate. So I can't actually find it comfortable to say that some members cannot go because of this. If there is, then the situation is so pathetic that I think.
All right, Honorable Yunusa Abubakar, member, House Services Committee, and also a member of the Defense Committee. We do thank you for your perspectives this morning.
Thank you.
All right, well, back in a moment. Stay with us.